This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast. We're brought to you by Prize Picks, coming at you Tuesday morning. It's June 18th. And what we've been doing on Tuesdays, I guess we chose to be Tuesdays, this month is positional recaps. A couple weeks back, we did the guards with Chris Hine, the wings last Tuesday with Jace Frederick. So you can go try and find those in the feed if you would like to do a guards or wings recap. But today we are doing the bigs with Kyle Theige, Karl-Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert, Naz Reid. We'll talk about Leonard Miller a little bit, even Luka Garza. But yeah, I have Kyle here with me. Happy summer. The NBA season is officially over. Congrats to the Celtics. Kyle, how are you?
It's good timing, right? I think this is probably the last pod will do that's like talking about last season. Mm-hmm. And then I think you and I might kick off some off-season stuff later this week. But one of the worst
draft stuff.
Yeah, and draft stuff. Yeah, no, I'm out for that. We'll call Tyler Metcalf, put the bad signal out for him. Yeah, one of the least interesting, exciting NBA finals that I can remember. That I'm not a hater. It's just there wasn't a lot of good games. There wasn't a lot of good storylines. So a fun Timberwolves season that I think we're going to talk about again today kind of went out in terms of a sad NBA season. But I'm excited for off-season mode. I'm taking a couple weeks off, and it's been kind of fun to like think back and use this kind of agenda or outline that you have for all these pods to look back at. I mean, I'm excited to talk about the bigs. So I think all three bigs had really, really fascinating and impressive seasons. So let's get into it.
Yeah. So if you haven't listened to the guards or wings episode, what we've been doing is just like an improvement for each player. Somewhere they plateaued, kind of stayed the same in an area. They regressed. So again, we'll do that with Towns, Gobert, and Reid today. Reminder, we're brought to you by Prize Picks. You can download the Prize Picks app and use the promo code Dane for a $100 sign-up bonus, though no NBA games now.
Taco Tuesday, though. Taco Tuesday today. Okay. 3 or 4 discounts. Check them out. Taco Tuesday, discounted picks. Pair them with something. It's a nice way to double your money. Triple your money, actually.
I was looking at it. I'm like, okay, like what are the other things on there? Obviously, there's WNBA, there's baseball. There's like some weird celebrity golf tournament that's on there. Austin Reeves is in it.
Yeah, buddy. Like, already got an entry in. Let's go.
Anyways, that's Prize Picks. Thanks to them all season for being a sponsor. Again, promo code Dane if you want a $100 sign up bonus. Kyle, but let's start here with Kat. I'll just start by recapping his counting stats. He averaged 21.8 points, 8.3 rebounds, and 3 assists per game in 33 minutes per game this year, after averaging 20.8, 8.1, and 4.8 in 33 minutes per game in just 29 games last season. So like per 100 possessions, to see how much it went up or down. Scoring was up by about 10% this year in year 2 with Rudy for Cat. Rebounding was up about 8%. And the assists was the area that really dropped, about 2/3 of the assists from a season ago. He also shot way better from 3 this year than he did last year. He was 41.6 this season after 36.6 a year ago. About the exact same volume of threes. I'm sure that'll come up later. But the 3-point percentage really did go up. The 2-point percentage dropped in a big way, 57.6% from 2 last season, which is about his career average. This year it went down to 55%, which was the second lowest 2-point field goal percentage of his career. I'm going to ask you for improvements, plateaus, regressions, but just kind of a lot there in those numbers. Does anything just pop to you and be like, I didn't know that, or I didn't think that, or anything from the counting stats pop?
Well, I love structure, so I wanted to go start with the good, get into the plateau, and then end with the regression. But we can flip it on this one because you talked about assists. My regression for Karl was just eyeball test, but like playmaking. It just it felt like he was the end result of more plays this season rather than like the starting point, and I was a really eyeball armchair quarterback. But then for you to say that his assist numbers were down, I felt that too. I thought all 3 of these guys, at least Naz and Rudy and Karl that we talk about, all, again, had really fascinating seasons, had really big seasons, and that's why this team was so good. Yeah. But there were nitpicks that you could point out for all of them. And for Karl, I just thought overall, and that's a bigger conversation, right? About the offense or the coaching staff. It's not just, wasn't like he was maybe selfish, but I did think watching all 98 games that they played this year, mostly with Karl, despite his injury, there just wasn't as much playmaking from him.
Yeah, it was what I had down. I put off the dribble playmaking because I think about like previous years for him, there was a little bit of like through the post playmaking, right? Double comes. You can be a playmaker through the post. He's had a lot of that. I think in the Rudy era, it's asked him to be more of an off the dribble playmaker. And part of like the assist distortion there is he was assisting like crazy a year ago, like the most he ever had in his career before he got hurt. Remember, that was all like the little lobs to Rudy and that sort of thing. But what kind of happened this season is that dried up a little bit. He's still good at finding Rudy, but it was just kind of when he would get downhill. It was tied for his highest turnover season, which was tied with last year in terms of like the percentage of possessions that he turns it over. So I'm kind of thinking about that all together, right? Like I'm going downhill. I'm not finding as many guys with passes there, and I'm turning it over in those situations a little bit more. That was also the regression I had for him. And then like weirdly, this was a Naz thing too, but he only shot 62% at the rim after shooting 77% a year ago. Naz was I have it here. I don't know what to make of this, but Naz shot 77% at the rim a year ago and 64% this year at the rim. That's a huge drop of at the rim field goal percentage. Honestly, didn't really know that until looking at that stuff. But specific to Cat, again, I'm looking at that like top-down north-south attack. Am I finding assists to players, shooters around me, lobs, whatever, without committing turnovers? And if not, if the pass isn't there, can I finish at the rim? The numbers say that did not go as well for Cat. To your point, the eye test didn't either. But maybe do you have a improvement so we can start on maybe a more positive note with him?
Yeah. So again, I thought the way you did the guards with Chris Hine and the wings with Jace Frederick, two of the best beat reporters I think in the league, was really smart, and you really kind of dove into it. I'm not one of the best beat reporters in the league, so I handed out awards for progressions, just kind of self-nominated them. Sweet. But for Karl, in terms of a progression, I gave him the Al Davis Award for just win, baby. Because I thought, and again, I'm politely trolling you a little bit, but when I was thinking of these, I thought back to Karl and his production or just performance post-injury, which came basically right when the playoffs started. Right. And his lack of shooting, and we'll talk on that a little bit, in the Western Conference Finals really nuked their chances to beat the Mavs. But I don't want to forget how good he was in that Phoenix series and how good he was in that Denver series. And back to my kind of trolling, you and Britt did a marathon pod about, acclimating him back and how would it work. And I think, and you were, I think, pretty pro on, you got to acclimate him. He's the ceiling. And I just thought he played winning basketball. And that was a real concern or question about him in his 8-9 year career was, you can do a lot of stats, you can do these things, but can you be malleable to do what your team needs? And we're less than 1 year removed from people being like, is he going to pass the baton to Ant, and like all the stuff that you were kind of worried about from a guy who less than 12 months ago was the face of the franchise. He kind of checked those boxes. Now, production wise, there's some things that kind of bugged me, especially just the lack of 3-point shooting. We can get into that. But overall, I thought, they don't sweep the Suns without those bursts that he gave them offensively, but also his ability to just kind of throw himself at KD and try to slow him down. And then his defense against Jokic was incredible. And again, he gave you those bursts. Against Dallas, it didn't show up, but I thought he was a winning player and really kind of cleared that up a little bit on his resume.
I think, like, obviously the playoffs and the KD matchup and the Jokic matchup are the light bulb moments in the playoffs of like, hey, look, doesn't suck at defense.
Right. Yeah.
But I just, this is like way simple, but I just was going through it this morning. I'm like, a good way to just acknowledge how much Cat has improved as a defender is to go through what the teams have ranked defensively in his career. And obviously Rudy is on this team now, and Jaden's on this team, and Ant can be a good defender sometimes. But I think this is a signal of Cat's growth on that side of the floor. His rookie season, the Wolves were 27th in defense. The year after that, they were 26th. The year after that, they were 23rd, 24th, 20th, 28th, then 13th, the year before Rudy got here, 8th, last year with Rudy, and 1st. Obviously, that is adding more defensive pieces around Cat. But I mean, I don't know. We started covering this team during some of those like 26s and stuff like that.
Yeah,
And
right.
and I remember in all seriousness, it being like a conversation about, can Cat just get up to close to average defense for a center? Obviously, at the time he was a center, and it was like we weren't even really looking for, hey, can Cat be a positive impact? It's like, just be neutral defensively. The offense will carry the water the rest of the way. And I don't think you can be a starter on the number 1 defense in the NBA without being clearly an above average defender. So that's a progression or an improvement over the course of his career in a major way. But I even think if you just look at the last 3 seasons, when I think that's when Karl started really taking defense more seriously, even the Pat Bev year, the year before Rudy got there, they get up to 13th that year. And I think it's because Karl put an intention on the defensive side of the floor. I think even last year before he got hurt, they knew that was going to be, or he was told, or they knew that that was going to be a big part of the identity. And he embraced that and worked on the things he had to do at the 4, and they get up to 8th. And then this year, I mean, I don't know. Karl-Anthony Towns I don't think it's fair to say Karl-Anthony Towns is a bad defender after he was a huge part of the number 1 defense this season. He stomped out that narrative, I guess, but I think the truth of it was he was at one point in his career clearly a below average defender. And to me, he's definitely not that. His intention is there. You can talk about, his ability to play on the perimeter defensively a little bit more. Also sometimes have to play as a 5, guard in the post, guard Jokic, guard KD. I mean, he's a more versatile defender, and the group benefits from his defense as a whole now. That's my biggest improvement for Cat.
And I don't really like talking injuries, especially in the playoffs, because you start to add these series upon series as you make a deep run, and I think everyone's kind of hurt or injured. Right. I mean, if you saw Luka pregame in the finals, he looked like the Michelin Man. He was just wrapped up from head to toe. But with Karl, this is the second year now where he's had to come back from an injury. And who cares? Who knows? Maybe we'll never get clarity. But I always just kind of watched him thinking that he was kind of like dragging that leg around a little bit, that he wasn't fully healthy. But again, that goes back to he just kind of threw himself out there and said, I'm going to give you everything I got. And there's things from the regular season that I do want to talk about a little bit in the plateau. But overall, when I think of it, I'm going to think of this season for Karl mostly as this playoff run. And I just thought he kind of, whatever they asked him to do, he did it. And some of those things he didn't do very well. But I think that is, I think that's, people scoff at the idea that Karl has had to sacrifice. And I don't, because I think he did sacrifice. He was just like, okay, I guess I'll guard KD. And now I'll guard, Jokic. And I'll just kind of do whatever you need. I won't steal any thunder from Ant. I won't steal any, touches from Rudy. But I just win, baby. I thought he got rid of a lot of demons this year in terms of what, again, the word narrative, what the national narrative was of him as a basketball player.
It's just, the sacrifice thing is a fact. He reminded us of that very many times, which sometimes it's like, it's like, I'm cool, I promise, if I like, but he did. And I was going to say, just like looking at, just like literally pulling up the stats, right? You kind of are looking at the 9 years and all this. The numbers are so different than they were before. In every different, like whatever, choose your category, like rebounding. Actually, I had rebounding as an improvement down for one that I had, even though the per game numbers, I mean, don't you feel like Karl-Anthony Towns was got a lot of high impact defensive rebounds this season?
He like, we use the word snatch, right? Like he snatched more rebounds, or just like, I have to get in traffic. He's not, the biggest leaper in the league, but he just found ways to use his body to get, like you said, crucial rebounds. Not all rebounds in my mind, the way I watch basketball, are the same. Right. And I think he got valuable rebounds at points where, again, to this defensive conversation, a defensive stop is when you get the ball back. It's not when you force a tough shot. It's when you get the ball. So he ended a lot of those great defensive possessions by getting the ball.
And it's like, you look at 2018-19 season, 12.4 rebounds per game. This season, 8.3. Like that, to me, doesn't say he's a worse defensive player. It means he's changed or sacrificed a role so as to be able to fit into the context of this team, and that happens across the board.
All right,
everywhere.
that was pro Karl. I
Mhm.
am pro Karl, more pro Karl than most. If I came on here and I said I was the best podcaster in the NBA and I did one show every 2 weeks, you would think I'm full of shit. So for the self-proclaimed best shooting big man of all time, second fewest 3 points attempted since 2018. This is my plateau. You said earlier that it was, I thought it was his second highest 3-point percentage of his career. Maybe you had it as the best. But
Second highest, yeah.
I just, again, this is real critical of a player that I am a big fan of. If he's on the team next year, which again, maybe we talk about today, maybe we talk about the offseason stuff. It's just an idea, right? That he would be a tradable player, just like other players on this team. But I'm moving forward today's pod thinking that they run it back with all these guys. He just has to take more threes. He is so good at it. And like I do think he is one of the best shooting big men of all time. You just can't have it be where you're trying to like lower your volume, but also increase your efficiency. Fuck efficiency. Just let it rip. I mean, we know now that you are so good at shooting threes. And is that going to solve all of the offensive woes? No. But I do think it would bolster this offense way more than we even think, just by letting a guy who is, essentially doesn't jump on his 3-point shot, just letting him rip. And I always say 8 attempts a game. It was not 8 attempts per game this year. Again, the leg injury, acclimating to year 2 of Rudy. But if this team looks the same at training camp 4 or 5 months from now, one of the things that has to be done is just finding ways for Karl to shoot more threes, because I think it is so valuable, especially when we just watched a Boston Celtics team that just let it rip, and they shot it almost without a conscience. They're like, whatever, we're just going to let 40 go a game. I don't think that's what Finch wants to do, but I think there's middle ground there that Cat needs to take way more threes next season.
It was my plateau as well, that the 3-point shooting was where it was before. It was the same 8 threes per 100 possessions, about 5.5 per game. And yeah, so it wasn't better. That's the thing. I don't want to rip on a guy who shot over 41% from 3 and be like his 3-point shooting was bad. That's not what you are saying. That's not what I'm saying. It's that the volume needs to be higher. And the main area, and I know we always get into his feet are really big or whatever, but 3% of his shots, of all of his shots, 3% of them were corner threes.
3, right?
3.
Yeah.
3. And it's a number that's never been higher than 4% in his whole career. Again, you go through all 9 years, and he's never shot more than 4% of his shots from the corners. He just doesn't take them there, and he doesn't, place himself there. And some of that I do think is coaching. I think he broadly, even through 2 years now in this Rudy iteration of the team, Cat is still a bit confused about what his own offensive identity is within the offensive identity of this group, right? And it constantly seems like he's testing different things and trying different areas. We're like, oh wow, this game he did shoot 3 corner threes, or this game he played through the post, but it doesn't feel like he has figured out where he needs to play offensively to benefit this group, like on an individual level, to benefit this group as a whole. And obviously a big part of that would be 3-point volume, finding more ways to shoot threes. It's something Finch has talked about all the time, of wanting Karl to shoot more of them. There just needs to be an interplay between Cat and Finch this summer of how are we doing this? Just setting like dumb benchmarks of like X amount of threes per game or from this area, or, after the fact, you obviously have the film and stuff like this. Like, Karl, how many possessions did you touch the corner over the course of this game or this week or this month? What are those sort of things? Just more intention, to your Celtics point of like, you kind of always know what the chessboard's going to look like for the Celtics. And with the Wolves, I don't know how they're going to arrange their pieces on the chessboard. And probably the most ambiguous one all the time is Cat, of like, where are we putting him here? And it seems like that's something that can be tweaked. And within that tweak, has to be seeing the 3-point volume going up.
If this team does look the same next year, again, we'll dive into the whole offseason, you and I and others, all summer long. But if this team does look like it did to end this last season, next season, I would put Karl-Anthony Towns' offensive production as the number one thing on the coaching staff I want to address going into training camp. Because you kind of know that Ant's going to take another leap with all the, Olympic basketball stuff he's doing. He's just going to kind of naturally take another leap. But as much love as we give a player in Karl for sacrifice, I almost think he's sacrificed too much, where he's almost like, I'll be a sponge, I'll do whatever. Like if I was like, yeah, Dane, I'll do whatever you want for the business. Like, can you produce the pod or can you upload it to YouTube? It's like, no, I can't actually. And for Karl, it's like, let's get back to what you are good at and then build off those things, because they lost the Western Conference Finals because they did not have a second banana, a Robin to Ant's Batman, and they need to find that again. And Karl can do it, but you got to put him in spots to be successful.
His offense overall in terms of like estimated plus minus, which we always talk about, I think is a good catch-all metric. He was 89th percentile offensively a year ago, got up to 93rd percentile this season, which is moving back in the direction of like the 6 years before Rudy got here. He was between 97th and 99th. So it's back going in that direction. Defensively, he was above average in terms of defensive estimated plus minus. 62nd percentile was his best defensive season since 2019-20, and overall 90th percentile. Again, moving back towards his pre-Rudy numbers that were mid to high 90s all the time. And that's the story with Cat, is how can you get more of the offensive version of Cat, or just the overall version of what Cat was in those pre-Rudy years, integrated into the Rudy context with the defense, right? Can you tic-tac-toe that? And now I think it's almost as simple as, if the answer to that is yes, if you can get those three things, then I think the Wolves are a contender, because to your point, they need him to be that second offensive guy. I kind of, I think about the Wolves in the context of the Nuggets and the Celtics from the last 2 years, where when I'm going to remember what I'm remembering about, I talked about this with Britt, with Denver and Boston, is kind of this roster construction, not specific to the cap, but just like the way it works is these two stars at the top, right? In Jokic and Murray, or Tatum and Brown, and then four awesome role players at 3, 4, 5, 6. Like the Wolves have that roster construction, but Cat and Ant aren't Jokic and Murray yet, or Tatum and Brown yet. Cat is what unlocks that. I think they have the depth of personnel to compete with, Gordon, Porter Jr., who else am I missing there? KCP, and it was Bruce Brown when they won the championship there, and then White, Horford, and those guys for Boston with their depth. The Wolves have that, but to like really unlock that, it's Ant and Cat being at the top beyond them, and I think it did start moving in that direction, and then it hit a wall. Whether that was fatigue or whatever it wasn't good enough to really be a contender this year, but it was close. It was moving in the right direction there. Last thing I have is just his contract. After making $36 million this season, obviously next year he starts the Supermax. It's a 4-year, $221 million contract that kicks in next season, so it will jump from 36 from Cat this season to 49.4 million for next season. Any final Cat thoughts?
No, I just we talked about this all May when we were doing playoff pods, but I just like how you compare the Jokic Murray thing. And you've complained about this a lot, or just brought it up, that there's just no synergy between Ant and Karl and a pick and pop 2-man game. That also is part of my biggest priorities this offseason, when you're starting to scheme up what the 24-25 Timberwolves will look like. Those two guys have to be more synergistic, or you just can't have them both on the team. It really is that simple to me. You have to have that second scorer. I mean, you watched what happened with Luka in the Western Conference Finals. He did have a little more from Kyrie, right? He had his second banana, and then in the finals, I mean, Kyrie had a really tough NBA Finals, and again, then it was just Luka kind of by himself, just kind of like it was Ant by himself in those Western Conference Finals. So that's a big priority for this coaching staff this summer, is to figure out to get those two on the same page.
Let's grab our first break here. Today's show is brought to you by Your Home Improvement Company, and this summer in June and July. They are offering a 30% off a bathroom remodel. It's backed with a lifetime warranty. This can be a complete bathroom remodel or just a tub to shower conversion. Perk of working with your home improvement company is zero money down, zero interest, and zero payments till 2026. If you contact them now, you can do that at yourhomeimprovementco.com. That's up on the screen, or call 866-777-YHIC. They also have a deal for this summer where it's buy 2 windows, get 2 windows free. They are triple pane windows installed by certified professionals. They also come with a lifetime warranty and the zero down, zero interest, zero payments till 2026 promotion there. Again, that's yourhomeimprovementco.com. You can contact them at 866-777-YHIC. Your home improvement company, where it's your home made better. We are also brought to you by Autograph and the Autograph app. I think this is like right now something to do. It's the off season. You're going to want to go, on your phone this summer, be like, what is going on with free agency and the draft and the off season right now? You could download the Autograph app, go to the Timberwolves community there, and you're going to see all your Wolves articles there from all the blogs, from all the reporters, shows like this one will be out there all in one place. It's a free app. It's called Autograph that you can download at the App Store or Google Play Store. You can scan the QR code on the screen if you would like, and just have all your Wolves content in one place in the Timberwolves community at the Autograph app. Again, for free, please use the code DaneMoore to let them know that you came from us. All right, Kyle, let's move over to Rudy Gobert. I'll start by just reading the counting stats off, and then we'll get to your improvements, plateaus, and regressions. Rudy's numbers this year were he averaged 14 points per game, 12.9 rebounds, and 1.3 assists in 34 minutes per game after averaging 13.4 points, 11.6 rebounds, and 1.2 assists in 30.7 minutes per game last season. Way fewer minutes per game last year than he had this year. He played a lot more this season. So from a per 100 possession standpoint, it was about the same across the board. Scoring was down 3%. Okay, Cat's back in the mix. Rudy's going to score a little bit less. Rebounding went up 4%. Pretty nominal, but moving back towards his Utah numbers. Assisting was the same for him. I will add in block shots per 100 possessions went up by 50%. That is a huge jump. 2.1 per 100 possessions last season, 3.1 per 100 possessions in 2023-24. Rudy's talked about how he's kind of evolved over the course of his career of not viewing good rim protection defense as block total numbers. It's more about the never minds and distracting players from taking shots there. But blocking a shot helps in that process. And Rudy had a lot more of that this season. Any reaction to those numbers, or you want to just jump into one of your things?
Did you say his shot blocking was up 50%?
50%, yeah.
Kind of makes you think he was healthier this year. For my progression or my improvement and this award, this is a little more vibesy, but I just gave him the LeBron James subtweet award for stop trying to find a way to fit out and just fit in.
Sure.
I know that sounds cheesy, but being in the locker room a little bit more this season, I was thinking back to when they had that doubleheader in Portland, and Rudy was like asking me for good French restaurants in the city, and they were like making plans. And then after the game, he was going out with his spouse to dinner with Kyle Anderson and his spouse. And like, just to think about the juxtaposition of even like at that point, 9 months earlier, when the vibes for those two were different. And now I think they're two of the closest friends on the team. I just thought in general, I was thinking about this when you switch a job, because I do think that's applicable to what Rudy did coming from Utah to Minnesota or going to a different organization. You kind of come in and you don't know all the processes. You don't know all the people. And I think Rudy did at 30 years old when he got here, try to like flex a little bit, like try to be like, new organization, like this is what I do and stuff. And then it wasn't helped by the fact that Finch and Tim Conley were like, yeah, we're going to get him. We're going to unlock this offensive potential. Like, so they're kind of feeding into his ego a bit, and it just didn't really work. I thought it was clunky. I thought, there's a lot of times where there was frustration on the court. The body language was bad. I thought this year he stopped trying to, as LeBron said, fit out and just fit in. Mm-hmm. And it allowed them. I mean, Ant took the biggest leap, this season. I don't think that's really a question. He's all NBA. But I do think Rudy Gobert was like the MVP of this team this season. There were so many of those February cold nights against bad teams where it was clunky because that was the story of the offense, but he came to play. He had 15 and 14 and was 8 for 9 and made a bunch of free throws. I just thought he was the truest professional on a team that has some really good professionals, right? Like Mike Conley and Kyle Anderson and stuff. So I thought he was the MVP of the team. I thought he fit in more in the locker room. I thought he fit in more on the court and just got back to doing what he does. To your point, blocking shots, or, defensive player of the year, grabbing rebounds, setting, screen assists. So I just thought that year one of the experiment experience was not good for many reasons, but year two was about as good as it can get. And a lot of credit, I think, just goes to Rudy fitting in as a member of this team.
So game 2 against Denver, right, which was the awesome defensive game, and it's the clip of Nikhil and Jaden McDaniels, and that was really like the coming out party of the defense to like the world, right? Because you're watching the Wolves Nuggets, and the Wolves defense looked incredible. Rudy Gobert didn't play in that game, and I remember right after the game, Finch just being asked about that special defense in that game. And the first thing he said was Rudy Gobert instilled a defensive identity in this team this season. And that's why they were able to play that way, even without him. And that sounds a little like gushy and cliche or something like that, or standing up for your guy. But I think for any of us that watch this team night in and night out, that's true. Like he did. He instilled a defensive identity into this team. He wasn't able to immediately do that year one, though, they were 8th in defense year one of Rudy being here after I ran through the rest of the decade. Defensive numbers.
Right. Yeah.
Not great. But I think that, I don't know if that's I think that is to your point. Like it's an improvement in being able to execute the ability to, as a leader, instill a defensive identity. And Rudy very much did that this season. I also just put down as an improvement, a little bit of playmaking from him too.
Yeah, for sure.
Just kind of catching on the short roll, looking really comfortable, not really comfortable, but more comfortable being able to catch there and be like, okay, there's Nikhil in the corner. There's Jaden in the corner, being able to be somebody who, if he carded on the roll, didn't really start dribbling, but just immediately kind of read the floor and passed. That was good. It was his second lowest turnover rate of his career. And you would think typically those would be the situations you're kind of on the move, need to make a decision. Those are the high turnover areas. They have been for Rudy historically in his career. Still not great turnover numbers. He still turns it over a lot, but it was interesting to note to me that this was his second lowest turnover rate of his career, even going back to the Utah days, given that they use him in a much more varied way, and even sometimes as a playmaker than he was used in Utah. I think that's a testament to his improvement there.
I had one more, just kind of a smaller one, but he did play 76 regular season games, which was the highest mark, I believe, since 2018. And that's just a really basic stat. But I think it's important because when the Rudy Gobert trade was made, he was, I believe, 30 at the time or 29. And one of the questions about, how much you gave up for him and his contract and stuff was that he wasn't going to age well. And for him to play more games than he's played in 6 years and to also do it at a level that was literally defensive player of the year, I think that's worth noting about a player who does take really good care of his body. And it's one of the microcosms of the way he leads, right? Yep. He's not the most vocal in the locker room on the court, but he leads by example. He takes good care of himself. He had a lot of the younger guys under his wing, post workouts and stuff. So I thought that was really big. What was your plateau?
I kind of did the same thing as like the Cat one, where it like got back to what it was. So I did the rim protection, got back to Utah levels.
Oh, that's smart. Okay.
His block rate was the same as his final year in Utah. Again, blocks aren't the be all end all, but if you delete year one of Rudy in Minnesota defensively across the board, it's starting to look like, statistically or just to the eye test, looking like Utah. So it's a plateau if you remove 2022, 2023, and that's a huge that's a huge win, right? To get Utah Rudy defensively.
I'll just agree with you. I didn't really have one. I just literally put in my notes nothing. I really just thought Rudy was awesome all year, true professional. I don't think we glorify defense enough still, and Rudy Gobert is always going to be a weird cat, both, I don't know, locally and nationally, just because, again, he's not a guard. He doesn't hit a lot of fadeaway jump shots, although he did against Denver that one time. But it's just, I thought so much of what this team did well and being a little more professional and bringing it every night, a lot of that does go to the coaching staff, and you got to give Finchie credit for getting, the Nazes, the Nikhils, the Ants, the Jadens, all under 25 years old to dig in on a cold January night to play defense. But I also think, too, that was just the tone that a player who played 76 regular season games brought. So I'm with you, Plateau. That's really creative, by the way, that he came back. But his ability to block shots and protect the rim he looked, as good as he ever looked in Utah, in my opinion.
What'd you have for a regression?
Punching teammates. Stop doing that. No, that's literally what I put down. I don't know. I just really enjoyed Rudy Gobert. I didn't know who he was in Utah because I didn't really follow Utah. And then I wasn't as close to the team, I don't think, in year one of the experiment. But I don't know. I just thought that overall he was a good teammate. And that stuff, to me, and the way I kind of break down hoops, as you know, is important because the team really, you and Britt talk about all the time, it was the best locker room you've been in. I think a lot of that goes to Rudy just, again, fitting in and accepting a role. And that was kind of my biggest complaint of the year one thing, was that they were trying to, I don't know, man, they bought a Cadillac or a car and they're like, we can take it off-roading. And it's like, no, you can't. Like, just get on the interstate and speed with it. And they sped with it in year two. They didn't take Rudy into the woods. And I really enjoyed watching Rudy Gobert play basketball all year. And even in the Western Conference Finals, when it got a little weirder and a lot of guys were exposed, I don't think Rudy was exposed. I thought, right, like they were a better defensive team, at least when he was on the floor. So
yeah, defensively, yeah.
In the offensively, that's a whole nother nightmare. But
that's what my regression is, and it's kind of like weirdly. Sorry if I'm cutting you off.
No, go, because I know what you're gonna say about.
It's so there's like, as a non-shooting big, not perimeter-oriented big, like playmaking really just is catching it in the middle of the floor and doing something with it, probably on the roll, right? Mm-hmm. And I think we both agree, and everybody who watched would be like, yeah, Rudy, when he caught it in that like 9-foot range, got better at finding guys to pass to. Mm-hmm. Well, he also started shooting from there a little bit because teams would just leave that wide open, right? Mm-hmm. And I was saying this at the beginning of the season, I thought it'd be really important for Rudy to be able to add a little push shot from, 8-9 feet. And he did add it. He didn't make it. He shot those some, and that's important. You think about the Denver series, right? Like you're bringing Jokic out, right? All the way to the perimeter. So then you're rotating maybe like Aaron Gordon or Michael Porter Jr. They're the low man rotating over to the rim. So they're your rim protection there. But this whole like 10-foot radius of the kind of middle of the floor is wide open. And they just kind of dared Rudy to be able to beat them from there. And if you're kind of staying home, then there's nobody to pass to when you're playmaking in that spot. And you need to be able to make that little 7-foot push shot. And in the Denver series, I thought that got exposed a little bit of like, one, his teammates were like, hey, that didn't go in very much during the season. Yeah, Rudy's wide open in this area, but what's he going to do with it there? And he shot 29% from the short mid-range this year, 4 to 14 feet, 26 of 90. He took 90 of them this regular season. So more than one a game. Mm-hmm. What does 29% mean? Well, Jokic was the best in that area in the league, 62%, right? We're not asking for that. But to contextualize what 29% is really bad. Jabari Walker was the only player in the league to shoot a lower percentage from floater range, that 4 to 14 foot range, while also taking more shots than Rudy Gobert did from the 90 shots that Rudy did from there. And Jabari Walker's a second-year player on the tanking Blazers. Again, this matters. And this is like needs to be something to focus on to develop, honestly, this summer, because teams are going to opt to allow Rudy to take the thing that he's worst at, and they're going to guard him. They're going to guard him like Denver, and they're going to leave that area open. And they'll be like, okay, Rudy, we actually respect your ability to be able to find Nickeil Alexander-Walker in the corner. You know what we're going to do? We're going to stay in the corner, and we're going to let you need to take a dribble from here on the roll and find some way to be able to finish or take some sort of floater shot. So he started taking some of them. They didn't go in. I just think to kind of get to that next level offensively for this team, and if you want to run more pick and roll, which I think would make sense for this team as well, Rudy needs to be able to score on the roll more often outside of dunks and do more outside of just being a passer for that area. So I don't know if that's a regression because he wasn't really doing it before, but it never developed his ability to score around the basket without dunking.
Our friend John Krasinski wrote a really good article about like the neuroscience and the pregame stuff that Rudy does. And I'm open to criticism, but do you think his hands were better this year than they were in year one? And again, the bar is like, I'm talking, he went from like tennis rackets for hands to like oven mitts. Like, do you think
I would say the coordination overall was better. If it was a 1 out of 10, it got up to a 2 or 3 or something like that. But yeah.
And I'm one, because again, nothing you just said was wrong. I'm just trying to like navigate an off-season workout plan for him of, to your point, if you take away the lobs, right? Like obviously he's a decade older than Derek Lively and they're different guys, but there's still a lot of, I think, similarities into their games. And all of a sudden, I mean, Derek Lively had 14 alley-oops a game against the Wolves in the Western Conference Finals. He had 0 against the Celtics in at least 4 or 5 of those games. So when you took that away, all of a sudden Lively is like, what? Like he had a lot of 6 and 4, box scores. Like what can he do?
Just like offensive rebounding.
Yeah. And for Rudy, like he does still love to, get a taste, right, of the basketball every now and then. So if all he's going to be able to do is score on offensive rebounding because, maybe the lob is just never there in the way that teams are going to defend the Wolves, then he does have to have that mid-range, not even a mid-range, just like that, like you said, floater or back to Karl thing, he has to have one thing that he's just really good at in his game. I mean, Derek Lively took and made a 3 in the NBA Finals. I don't imagine Rudy's going to be ever doing that, but what do you work on, right? Because you don't really work on defense in an individual workout. What is that one offensive thing that it's like ants, like what is your one go-to move? And I think for you, it's just, or not for you, for Rudy, but you're right, is that when he catches the ball in that space, like, is there a way to just, what did you say he shot 26%?
29%, made 26 of the 90 he took from 4 to 4.
But like, would you be cool if I said that number was 41%?
Yeah.
Like that would just be like, okay, that's it. That was the improvement we needed.
And if it was on more volume too.
Sure.
Like, there should be some more volume to that. Like, I mean, again, I'm not a coach or a player development coach, but I just kind of think about it of like, all right, like let's rank priority of things we're working on this summer, right?
Yep.
You can do the same thing with Ant of, 3-point shooting versus throwing lobs versus working on mid-range footwork. Like what's the pecking order of importance of those things? And I think like for Rudy, let's de-emphasize some of the back to the basket post up stuff of areas to like, his like little triple pivot post thing where he's like trying to get to a dunk, but if he doesn't, it's like a weird underhand thing. Like let's let go of some of that in terms of like what we're working on over and over again. And I think like this push shot floater thing, like I think you can do that move with more power. Like you can kind of like get into somebody like chest to chest and then take it over them. So there's a little bit more force to it. Really challenge that Michael Porter Jr. at the rim. Don't just like be like, okay, Michael Porter Jr. here is at 2 feet and I'm at 8. So I'm just going to take this like awkward floater. The further you get in and even getting like some contact to that, I think like can like balance your body in a way of like, okay, I've got the hit here. I know where the defender's body or hands are to block the shot. Like I would just like to see a little bit more force to that move. Like, okay, here I caught it middle of the floor, power dribble straight up into like a floater, straight onto the rim, 7-foot shot. Like we can make that. You can make that. And that is with work. I know he doesn't have great touch on those sort of things, but I believe it can be better than 29% with the right work there. And I think it's pretty critical that it is. I think whether it's the regular season next year or in the playoffs, there's going to be times again in which he is just ignored in that area of the floor, and you need to be able to have things to do there. Now, yeah, Ant needs to be better at throwing him lobs. Like, that's the biggest difference between the Derek Lively thing. He's got the best guy throwing it to him, and Rudy's got the worst. Like,
you got the two best, maybe, right?
Kyrie, right?
Too.
Yeah, Kyrie's up there too, and you know, and obviously, like, we have the counterpoint of, like, look at Rudy and Mike pick and roll. You know, like, part of it is Mike knows how to get a little bit deeper and throw the lob. Like, can Ant do that? And then now Rudy's doubling the amount of, like, lob dunks he's having next year. Sure, that's great. But I think this is part of it too. And I really kind of like the Cat 3-point shooting thing of just, like, simply by boosting the volume of that, I think you find a positive ripple effect throughout the rest of the offense.
You know what else is interesting? We're going to solely focus all of our excitement and attention right this summer on, okay, Anthony Edwards, Team USA, what kind of steps does he take to make another leap? I'm really excited to watch France because I think I'm right on this, but, like, I would imagine Rudy Gobert's usage rate is just a little higher with that French team. Again, I joke about how Mike and Kyle kind of speak French, but a lot of the guys on the team don't in terms of understanding how to get Rudy involved. Well, guess what? Team France, they all actually speak French. And he's going to be playing alongside, I think Wemby's in it too, who is not the same player as Karl, but, you know, you get a too big look. And I'm just curious to see, does Rudy show some of that? You know, they do rely on him a little more in this European style basketball to score. And will he show something that, like, he's going to have all summer to work on it because he's playing again at a really high level? It's not just all summer YouTube videos. So maybe he will show a little something this summer in the Olympics that can then translate to the next season. But it is an area that they just have to find ways. He has to find ways, I think, to be more productive.
No, I think the France point's a good one. I've just started watching them a lot the past 2 years since they got Rudy, and, like, Fournier functions as their aunt. And that, I don't know, that makes sounds funny to people, but, like,
no, I get it.
He does. Awesome. He's like this. They're like playmaking too, who, like, does, you know, get into the middle. Like, so I'm just saying, when you're watching France this summer, watch the interplay of Evan Fournier and Rudy Gobert, and how that in ways is different than it is with Anthony Edwards. And literally, if I was on the Wolves staff, I would be showing Ant what Fournier and Gobert do in action there together. Batum's involved. They often have, like, a third player involved. I don't know. Like, France's offense that includes Rudy Gobert looks significantly better than Minnesota's offense that uses Rudy Gobert. And that, you know, and some of that is, you know, the competition and stuff like that. But a lot of the way is it's a belief in it, and it's the way you get to it. And I just say all of this to mean, like, more meat on the bone, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's more that you can get out of Rudy. And I know so many people are like, oh my God, no, like, less. Like, I don't want him to touch it. Well, if he's wide open in pick and roll, which he's going to run all the time, he needs to be.
And this is the first time I actually kind of am a French nationalist that France has played with. I mean, it's always been, you know, essentially 4 out and Rudy. He's going to be playing alongside another big for his, you know, national team, which is a little more rare than he's done in the past. So I am excited to see how him and Wemby play together. I mean, that's just basketball kind of porn 101. But outside of Team USA, which should have a really good team in the Olympics, in all sports will be good. I'm really excited, and I'll be tuned into all those Team France games because I think you might be able to see what Rudy could look like next year.
And then just to wrap it on Rudy, the offense was up to 78th percentile this year after 60th percentile a year ago. In context, it was 90th percentile his final year in Utah, so there's more to get to. I mean, that's proof of it. Like, the offense can get better. He was 95th percentile defensively at their 81st percentile a year ago. There's even more, like, in terms of impact, defensive stuff. If you just look at these numbers, I mean, his 7-8 years before in Utah, 99th percentile, 100th percentile, 99th percentile, 99th percentile, 99th percentile, 99th percentile, 98th percentile, 98th percentile. He's had more impactful defensive seasons, according to this metric, than he did this year. And I think in ways I can picture that too. So again, much like Cat with his catch-all metrics, they're moving back toward where they were before they paired up together. Does that make sense? Rudy and Cat moving back towards the levels they were at before. Last thing with Rudy, he made $41 million this season. His contract goes up to $43.8 million for next season. Then there's a player option on the deal for $46.7 million the year after that. He's eligible to add on to his deal. You can opt out of that player option, and they could give him an extension on top of that. That's probably more in the off season as we look at that. But yeah, Rudy has 2 more years left on his contract, the second of which is a player option there.
That's a topic for me again later this week or as we do another pod. But just to clear up, like, he is eligible technically this summer to add on or to negotiate an extension.
I'm not sure with how it, like Windhorse was saying. Actually, you sent that to me. Like Windhorse was saying, everybody can start signing, re-signing their own free agents.
Okay.
As soon as the finals are over. I think from what I looked into it after you texted that to me, I actually think Rudy could sign an extension today, but whatever. Point is he can sign an extension. He can sign an extension this summer in once the league is in off season, what is in free agency. Now, I don't know if they will do that or not. Right. You need to figure out if that is the right terms. Are we sure? Like, everyone's like, oh yeah, Rudy's just going to take a discount. Like, he's going to opt out of that $47 million. And then now he's going to sign, a longer term deal for like $30 million a year. And I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't quite make sense. If, like, why would I let go of 47 to sign 30, that, something like that, he could get some sort of decline theoretically there. But I just think we broadly need to get used to these numbers are just going to be a lot bigger on contracts, and look no further than Cat, and Jaylen Brown, who are going to be starting to make $50 million a year. And there's going to be a trickle down effect for that. So Rudy still is not going to get that type of deal at 33 years old or whatever, but he's still going to probably be a $40 million a year player. I would assume there. Let's move over to Naz Reid. Ready for that one?
I am. Just off the top, if you know, you know, but the award for his progression was just the Mike Jones Award. Back then, no one really wanted Naz, and now everyone wants Naz. He, production-wise, I got some interesting things that I thought.
Oh, should I do the counting stats first?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
wow.
I'll do these ones quickly.
281, 330.
Naz averaged 13.5 points, 5.2 rebounds, 1.3 assists in 24.2 minutes per game after averaging 11.5, 4.9, and 1.1 assists per game in 18.4 minutes. So up from 18.4 to 24.2 this year. That's a pretty big jump in minutes per game. Per 100 possessions, that means his scoring, rebounding, assisting actually dropped a little bit. Scoring went down 8%, rebounding went down 16%, assisting went down 7%. Now, I'm sitting there typing that out yesterday, and I'm like, okay, well, that makes it sound like Naz Reid had a year where he regressed. Well, it's not about him regressing. It's about him, playing in a role more integrated with the starters, with guys, a year ago, he was playing pretty much just with the bench group. Now he's in the mix with Rudy, with Ant, with Cat, all those guys. And while the total production maybe went down, he did it much more efficiently, effectively, fitting into the group. And, he just shot way better. 41.4% from three on very high volume. Remember, Cat was 41.6%, but Naz had a significantly higher volume of 3-point shooting and the same percentage of Cat. And, if Cat's one of the best shooting bigs in NBA history, that's a testament that on the same team, Naz shot the same percentage and shot more of them than Cat did on a per possession basis. Again, his 2-point shooting did drop off, but those are the Naz counting stats. Go ahead.
Kyle Guy, Jalen Hands, Justin James, Bol, Jalen Noel. All those guys were drafted ahead of Naz Reid back in 2019. Naz Reid, as many know by now, was undrafted. He was essentially deemed back in 2019 not one of the 60 best, players coming into the league in that draft class. And for the Mike Jones Award, I mean, for him to just be essentially almost out of the league before he even started, to come full circle to not only, having a big payday last year, contract-wise, maybe just slip this in right now of this, he'll be coming up on his second year of that deal. And then next summer, will he have a player option? Is that how this works? Mm-hmm. So he's already in line again for another massive payday next summer. But just, I don't know, his aura right? Team sponsor. I think there's 29 other teams that would love to have Naz Reid on their team. And I'm talking about all the vibes and all the other stuff, the towels. I remember my season started with him just driving a yacht to a Young Gravy concert. And then he's got a beach towel and he's got people tattooing his name on their lips. But he also I think he was kind of the heart and soul of this team. Like when he came on, last night, game 5, Porzingis subs in off the bench and the crowd goes crazy.
Yeah.
That was Naz Reid every game for 41 home games. Is that when he came onto the court, it was whatever happened in those first 5-6 minutes, stagnant offense, people stood up, sat down. When Naz came in, it was like a jolt, not just for the team, but for the fan base. So, and I also thought too, his 3-point shooting was just, what did he shoot this year from 3?
41.4.
40. Yeah. That's not bad, right? That's actually the real answer here to progression is that he just took, I think he took 5 attempts a game and 41%. That's big, right? Because as you do navigate this offseason, you figure out, we've always talked about he's more of a wing now, maybe, but if Karl were to not be on this roster moving forward at some point, it would just make sense that Naz Reid would probably slide into a little more of a small ball 4, even though he's 6'10". I just thought his 3-point shooting really was the thing that I'll take away from this season, as well as just, he might be the most popular athlete in Minnesota. And it's an off-season question that I will ask you later, but I don't know how you ever let this guy leave. Like he just continues to get better and better from a guy that no one wanted him 5 years ago to now. I think every team would love to pencil Naz Reid into the rotation.
So I have 3-point shooting down as my improvement too, also positional versatility. But this is kind of random. But before I get to that, I was looking at just some of the estimated plus minus stuff, right? And they assign a percentile for offense and they assign a percentile for defense. And Naz was 63rd offensively, 72nd defensively this year. I don't know. His are kind of weird because they still call him a center. So whatever. But that's not my point. I'm not even talking about those numbers. But I was like, who else around him is like similarly like 65th and 70th percentile on those two things? And DeAndre Ayton was. And he was 68th on both of them. And I was like, I don't know. No, this might just be like biased. This is a Timberwolves podcast. But like, what would happen if both of those guys were free agents this summer? Like, Naz Reid gets more, right?
The undrafted kid from LSU and the number 1 overall pick out of Arizona. Like Naz Reid would open market, free market. Yeah. This was baseball. Naz Reid would get more money than DeAndre Ayton.
That's just kind of crazy. To your point of like starting with Kyle Guy in your analysis, and DeAndre Ayton was taken ahead of Luka Doncic. Which is just maybe to everybody who's mad that I haven't done a draft podcast yet. That's just my point that this is all kind of a crapshoot.
But he's gotten. We talked about culture, right? Rudy added a lot to the defensive culture. Tim Conley adds to the behind the scenes culture. But I think Naz Reid, I always think about, and I've said this for 4 years on a podcast, but when someone with the team told you and I that he took losing the hardest when this team was back in your earlier point about 29th in defense every year and just sucked. He, ironically, being kind of a no-name, was the guy that was like, I hate losing the most. And you saw that. Like, he was, again, I think, the spirit of the team. Everyone on this team loved him. He had really tight relationships with guys like Jaden. But I also think, too, he was kind of a mentor for a young guy in Leonard Miller. So I just think big picture, he was 6th man of the year. When I think of 6th man of the year, right, it's always like guards that can freestyle a little bit and just hit a lot of jump shots. He is the antithesis of what I always thought 6th man of the year was, but he served his role and he did it so well. And I just think that, for a guy that was undrafted, he's a foundational part of this whole franchise. And he has to be someone that when you are figuring out your books this summer and the second apron and picks and all this stuff, he has to be up at the top of how are we going to make sure we keep this guy around.
Futuristically thinking about, and him, Nikhil, Rudy will all be, or could all be, free agents 12 months from now. Based on those player options and stuff like that. But you do need to consider, like, make part of your plan this summer about your plan for next summer if it is important to you to keep Naz Reid, Nikhil Alexander, Rudy Gobert. Maybe prioritizing those 3 are big. Just last thing on the 3-point shooting I wanted to note, because I didn't really realize this. Made 42% of his threes from above the break and made 42% of his threes from the corners. And he doubled his corner 3-point volume. And that is probably going into the more overarching improvement of Naz's game, which was just showcasing positional versatility, right? Playing the 5 the majority of his career, played some 5 this year, played a lot of 4 this season. And I would say played a lot of 3. And from offensively playing those positions where he's positioned on the floor, but I think even it was more so noticeable that he was able to guard, more perimeter oriented players. And that's actually what I had for my plateau. We did those weird in this episode. But what I said is for my plateau is what he showed defensively at the end of last season before he got hurt. Remember Naz week, where he was playing, they started playing the 3 bigs together, and they started playing Naz at the 3 or as more of a wing. We didn't know if that was an aberration because it was literally like 3 or 4 games. It was this West Coast road trip before he broke his wrist in Phoenix. Whatever Naz week was right before he got hurt, that sustained. And it wasn't some sort of like blip, hot road trip from Naz. Everything he showed in that as a scorer, as a defender, as a weapon before getting hurt at the end of the 22-23 season, not only sustained, but improved. And we didn't know that. We didn't know that going into this season, how much that was going to be the case. You have a regression or a plateau? What do you got?
Yeah. So for plateau, kind of want to dive in this one with you because you opened up a lot of people's minds to the fact that he's a little more of a wing, right? Like, yeah, he came in as a dollar store Karl-Anthony Towns backup 5, shifted down to a 4, and then this year really kind of popped a lot at the 3. But his per 36 it was his lowest free throw rate of his career. It's really basically his all 5 years in the league has just been he averages like 1.9 free throws a game. And I know that sounds like a nitpick, but I was also thinking if you had to rank the guys on this team that played the most physical, like Ant is number 1. But when I think of Naz, I'm like, he's in the post and he's got a little bag to him and he's like bullying people. Or when he drives, like other than maybe Karl, like no one was on the ground more than Naz just because he plays so physical. And for a guy to average less than 2, I mean, he averaged 0.1 more free throw attempts this season than Kyle Anderson. And Kyle Anderson was actively hunting not to shoot free throws. So I think that's a part of his game where whatever he does slide in long term, again, he has to, if you're the front office, you have to make sure that player retires here. But if he's going to be a wing or if he's going to be the next 4 alongside Reid or something, this team has a lot of needs and we'll talk about it all summer. But one of them to me is just guys that get to the rim more. And by that, then get to the free throw line more. So if you're going to be the second most physical, imposing basketball player on the Timberwolves and you're going to shoot less than 2 free throws a game, I think that's probably an easy fix. Just get your head down more. But I don't like that number. I don't like that Naz Reid is going to probably continue to play more and more minutes and never be, and he's not even a great free throw shooter, but that's just like an area where those are free points. And for an offense that really hurts finding ways to get points, getting easy ones with your second most physical basketball player seemed like a good area to start.
No, that's what I had too. The combination of getting the free throw line and finishing at the rim more often. Again, and so both Cat and Naz shot 77% at the rim a year ago. This season, Naz shot 64% at the rim. Cat shot 62% at the rim. Like, I don't know what that's about. Like, but that's not acceptable for either of them. They need to be weapons and should be. I mean, like what I do think that's about is Rudy Gobert being in the way a little bit, and his guy coming over to help and strip Naz or take a charge on Cat or whatever. But that existed the season before as well, So regardless, those two need to both be more higher level finishers at the rim. And they had the games to be able to do it. It's like, can you do that? Can you do that without getting stripped when you're going downhill? Karl, can you do that without committing an offensive foul? And then once you get there, like, I think both of them have a little bit of the like, all right, I'm there, I'm getting bumped. I'm trying to let the ref know about the bump rather than just focusing on the finish. I think maybe both of them are just feeling like they should be at the free throw line a little bit more, and that's getting into their head and getting into their effectiveness. But absolutely a low-hanging fruit, meat on the bone for the power forwards on this team, but specifically Naz is, get to the line. Can we see like in the second unit, when Naz is just out there and there's like one other starter on the floor, can we run Zion offense? Like just
Yeah.
try it. You know what I'm saying? Like let's just go 4 flat.
Yep.
Like why? Like I've always wanted to see more of that. We don't think like Naz has enough like wiggle to get back past one guy there and then get downhill. I mean, Zion is a completely different level finisher, but I've always wondered if that's like part of the next progression for Naz is more focused individual offense that he, can self-create in those sort of ways. I do think that would lead to getting the line more, and it would at least give him more rim attempts. But yeah, there's just broadly with Naz, I think there's more to tap into. More to tap into here.
Quick regression. Per 36, lowest rebound total of his career. Now, at the top of this pod, you said Karl, I think maybe one of his progressions was that he got back to being a good rebounder. So chicken or egg in terms of if Rudy and Kat are both rebounding better, maybe there's less for Naz to do. However, again, a topic this summer will be the long-term questions at power forward and who's it going to be. And if Kat were to be sent out, can Naz Reid rebound at a good enough level that this team doesn't regress back to the Memphis Grizzlies situation where all of a sudden, I mean, Ant's grabbing more rebounds. I mean, he's just a dominant physical guard who's always going to have high numbers, but you need more than 2 guys to rebound. And Jaden, I think maybe that ship has sailed. He's just never, and he's being asked to guard in the perimeter and stuff. But yeah, you got an older guard in Mike Conley, and you've got a guy in the perimeter in Jaden that's not going to rebound. You need to have 3 rebounders out there. And I think Naz, that would be something that as he shrinks his body down and gets in better shape and, weighs less, can you still be dominant on the glass?
No, I think that's huge because Mike Conley's never going to be a huge rebounder for you. Ant comes and goes rebounding.
Yeah.
Jaden is not a good rebounder. Part about where he's positioned and just in general hasn't been that. Rudy's a great one, but they need more rebounding from Naz, and I do think some of that, like at least just to the eye test, he looks a little bit more like he understands his spots, played more physical underneath there. Like I just think Naz's boxing out went up a ton, or like finding a body. I thought that was big. You touched on the contract a little bit there before. Again, he made $13 million this season. He'll make $14 this coming year, and then he has a $15 million player option going forward. I think it'll be interesting this summer to see what Malik Monk gets in free agency. He's an unrestricted free agent. That would kind of be maybe the high end of what I would expect Naz to get a year from now, but that might be a big number. I think he sees a big raise off of the 14 that he's making this season for next year. We're already up over an hour here, but I did want to just touch on Leonard Miller and Luka Garza briefly. Do you have a thought on either of those guys?
I think we should put a pin in that though and say that's it. That was the 23-24 Minnesota Timberwolves. It was a hell of a season. I had a lot of fun. We laughed. I cried. But I think we need to now pivot in this. I'm challenging you. We need to pivot our brains a little bit we ate a lot of steak in April and May, high level basketball analysis, game pods, just the highest of the highs. We got to go back to ramen. And I think that's where I transition into Luka Garza and Leonard Miller and draft talk and summer league. Like we got to kind of boil it down a little bit here to see what this team has at the lower rings of their hierarchy. And for me, it starts with Leonard Miller. I just put a fun nugget. I don't really have progressions. He can't drink in Vegas this summer because he's 20. Yep. And I'm high on him, but I also know as a fan, I get high on a lot of young players that normally don't pan out. I mean, we're still trying to figure out if the lawnmower, if this team has grass or turf, right? Like, do they need a lawnmower? But for Leonard Miller, he can, to the Naz point earlier, I know Leonard Miller can rebound at an NBA level. I just think he has like a quick second bounce too. But I was texting Tyler Metcalf, who is a draft guru, but he was saying that Leonard Miller in this draft, a draft that is not that great, but probably goes like between 10 to 15. I think there's a lot of untapped potential there. I think he became more serious as the season went on, but I just want to see what they have in him. And it's something I'll bring up later, but I think you got to get the young guys some run. And I don't just mean in Vegas. I think I would sacrifice some wins next season early on, because I think you got to see if some of these young guys can give you a jolt of speed, playmaking, athleticism, things that the 23-24 Timberwolves kind of lacked. And it was shown in the Western Conference Finals. So I don't know what he is. I don't know what position he is. I know he's 6'10". I know he can handle. I know he's left handed. I know he clicks his feet when he shoots, but I want to see his development this summer because to me, of the young guys, he's the most intriguing long-term fit.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think he's nowhere near being, just from what I've seen, being ready to be an NBA rotation player right now.
Sure. Yep. You're right.
But like kind of the markers of showing us, or more importantly, the coaching staff and front office, that there's more there is summer league. There is what he's able to do this summer in, actually getting the opportunity to play more in runs and that sort of thing. I am concerned about like the jumper, and I think it's important to figure out what position he is. But from, having watched all of his garbage time, but also watch him in summer league last year, a couple G League games this season, there's a do shit factor to Leonard Miller, and also like a massive belief in himself, just like when he's playing, like that he is as good as anyone on the floor. And it's not like in a cocky way, it's just like kind of looking at whoever it is in front of him and like, oh, I can go through this person to get this rebound, or take them off the dribble, or go through them to finish there. And that's really intriguing, particularly at 19, 20 years old, of having that belief and also kind of having some of the physical force to justify that. Now, it's a little bit sloppy when he gets in the middle of the floor or by the basket and those sort of things. But I think if something really comes of Leonard Miller, I will think back to this, that belief that he has. And I know you could say that, like that, again, that sounds kind of like pie in the sky. Like you could say that about any player, but I wouldn't say that about every player. And I would say that about Leonard Miller, because there's something different to me that stands out there. Again, lot that I think needs to be chiseled down and demanded, of like, this is what the role is, that, and these are the things we're asking him to do. It just kind of felt like you're out there, keep learning basketball your rookie season. I would assume his sophomore year will be kind of like that too, kind of along the Josh Minot line of his second year this season. But I don't think that means he can't learn. And I don't think that means he can't be part of the rotation, maybe later this season, but definitely the 25-26 season. And that's really probably from a roster construction standpoint, when the need of Leonard Miller being a rotation player starts, when you lose a Naz, a Nikhil, a Rudy, or maybe multiple of those guys, then like that's coming. Their Denver Nuggets moment of like, hey, we need somebody from our bench to be able to come in here, which you've been on forever. Like, hey, this guy, we absolutely need this guy to play 16 minutes a game throughout the whole season. And for the Wolves, given their cap situation, that has to come internally. It has to come from Josh Minot, Wendell Moore, Leonard Miller, somebody on this team, or from a veteran minimum player. And the person we're betting on there more than anyone is Leonard Miller to be able to do that. So I don't know. I'm excited to see.
And I think Leonard Miller, this specific summer and offseason is going to be is tied to what happens with Kyle Anderson. Because I think Jalen Clark is probably just their plan to replace Na. Again, not offseason talk, but he'll be a free agent next summer, and he's played so well that he's going to get a lot of money. Yeah. And you kind of just pencil Jalen Clark into that role. But for Leonard Miller, if this team doesn't re-sign Kyle Anderson and put themselves way over the second apron, it might be that they have a belief in Leonard Miller to do, again, Kyle Anderson is the boat in the Family Guy analogy. He is just so much better than Leonard Miller at everything and so much more trustworthy. But depending on the cost and all that stuff, I might just want to have the mystery box of what Leonard Miller is, because again, he is not even in the hemisphere of how mature and Kyle Anderson is. But as we talk about money down the road, like you might just have to go with the mystery box because it costs you 1/30 of what the boat might cost.
I have a fun Luka Garza nugget. If that's what we're doing here.
Yep.
I heard during a big part of being ready for the Denver series was Luka Garza's ability to play scout team Jokic.
Oh, I love that.
Right?
I love when good? the fifth cornerback for the Vikings is like in the Patrick Mahomes role in practice.
Lamar
that week.
Jackson or whatever.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay.
And doesn't that make like
perfect sense?
Perfect sense. I heard about it, then I asked Luka about it, just like in the locker room one time, and he was like, "Yeah, this has been awesome. Like I get the ball in practice all the time, and I'm making it, trying to, whatever. It's a cliche answer, or whatever. Trying to help the teammates in whatever way I can." And I'm like, that's a sweet reason to have Luka Garza, or like I don't know, an impactful way of having Luka Garza. The question is can he be impactful? In the actual rotation at some point. Obviously that's hard to see on this team given all the centers they have, but I just think I would just love to see Luka Garza on some team have a 15-minute a game role here in the next year or two, just to see what it looks like. But yeah, that's what I got on Luka Garza.
He's awesome when he plays, but he only plays in garbage time. And that would be what you have to figure out this summer is he an NBA player? I think a lot of people think he is. He clearly has skills. He sacrifices well, whatever they ask him to do, whether it be, not lose weight, but just like play defense or get better at defense or have better hands. He's done all those things, but he is older. He's not 20 years old like Leonard Miller. So I think it's going to be a big summer for him. I think the team does like having him around. He is a great emergency big, but at some point he kind of has to bet on himself and maybe spread his wings. So it'll be a fun offseason for him because, again, he's just a really good guy to have on your team. He's like the perfect 15th guy. So that's another guy. I mean, probably not going to be on a summer league roster, but it'll be interesting to see what happens this summer.
Yeah, and I think he's a restricted free agent again, coming off of the two-way. So they'll have the opportunity to match whatever Garza is offered, if he's offered anything in free agency. And if he's not back, just was always a fun player, to have come in garbage time. And honestly, like, I mean, you've sat there with me a bunch of times. I mean, an incredible shooter. Like just watching him, we're always out there for like his part of pregame warmups. That dude could shoot it. That dude can really, really shoot it. And I think like, even if it's like on the Pistons or something like that, actually, I think drafted him. But just, I'd be cool to see him get an opportunity to kind of unfurl that in the way that it is in the G League, and a slight upgrade from the G League to the Pistons or something like that would be cool. That's all I got on the bigs, Kyle. You got any final thoughts? It's went long.
Yeah, I know. I thought we were gonna do an hour on Leonard Miller. No, I'm excited. I think to me that does kind of like put a bow on what was a really fun season. Obviously a great playoff run that didn't end the way you wanted it to, but a lot of demons were exercised, and now I really do want to kind of dive into, this team has draft picks in the first round and the second round, and they don't really have any cap flexibility. But to me, the biggest thing that's going to be answered this offseason is going to be the ownership stuff, and otherwise it's kind of business as usual. 7 guys, 7 of the best players are re-signed for next season. So are they going to make some tweaks? What are they going to do? But I'm sure you and the crew will have it all covered on this podcast as we transition into summer mode.
Yeah, well, for Thursday, it's going to be me and you. We're going to do, this was your idea, just like kind of 5 questions, 5 burning questions entering the off season. We'll do that on Thursday to kind of, set the scene, because the off season starts, or, can start signing free agents July 1st, whatever. That's in less than 2 weeks. We'll hit that. And then Tyler Metcalf, who you've mentioned a few times on here, he's been on the pod before to talk about draft stuff. It works with No Ceilings. Is going to join me on Monday afternoon to help familiarize me and hopefully some of you listeners who have probably done more draft research than I have on what is available in that kind of 27 to 37 range that the Wolves will be drafting in. So that's what's coming up. Be me and Kyle again on recording on Thursday morning. That'll be out Thursday afternoon. That's what's up next, and we'll keep rolling from there. Until then. He's Kyle. You can follow him on Twitter at Kyle Theige. I am Dane at DaneMooreNBA. Yep. Until Thursday. He's Kyle. I'm Dane. Peace out. How I'm feeling, man. I hope it never stop. Yeah. Green and hot, so you can find me in the crowd. Yeah.